Chapter 1 Humanism, the Religion of Fallen Man. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. Why should the nations say, "Where is their God?" Our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but do not walk. They make no sound in their throats. Those who make them are like them. So are all who trust in them. O Israel, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. Psalm 115, verses 1 through 9. The doctrine of humanism is both a growing trend and a growing problem. This means that if we want to be faithful Christians in an age of rampant, unbridled humanism, we must know our interlocutors and be able to dismantle their ungodly worldview. If it is true that our job is to take the land and Christianize it, and that absolutely is what the Great Commission is all about, then it follows from this that we must be committed to understanding the rival, anti-Christian worldviews that are being pontificated in the public square. When we understand them, we can thus dismantle them, and dismantle them we must do. That's the logic behind why I wrote this book. That, and because the church has by far and large refused to discuss any of these topics for various reasons we will get into. As the reader will see shortly, humanism can be a tricky thing to nail to the wall because it's like Jell-O. It's squirmy when you touch it. This means that I'm going to spend a lot of time referencing various people and various works so you can get an idea of what it is that's being said. And, hopefully, when we look at various texts from Scripture, we will be better prepared and equipped to bring forth the onslaught of our apologetic. In this chapter, we are going to examine humanism in general and show from the Bible why humanism is the religion of fallen man. Humanists would already be frustrated because they do not see themselves as being religious. But the reality is, they are the most ardent of religious people. Men, in their sins, will default to a humanist religion long before bowing the knee to their Creator. Apart from grace, that is where we all begin. In the following pages, we will pull apart the various layers of this religious dogma by looking at the philosophical underpinnings of the worldview, and how those philosophies work themselves out into every area of life. Humanism is a religion of dominion. Make no mistake, and the folly does seep into every area of life. As such, we will cover things like socialism, sexuality, education, immigration, just war, the drug war, guns, and racism. Everywhere you look, humanism is attempting to be the religious and social order of the day, so we must not be silent about it. Having said all that, let's get to work. It was Monday, October 29th, 1945, when the 40-year-old French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre delivered a lecture at Club Maintenant in Paris called Existentialism is a Humanism. 2 years before this, Sartre had published Being and Nothingness, and since that had caused quite a stir, he accepted the invitation to lecture on existentialism with the hope of correcting his detractors. On the one hand, the Catholics and the Christians criticized his views. On the other hand, the communists were offering their fair share of disdain. In light of this brushfire, Sartre needed to clear the air and did so that Monday evening in Paris. Most certainly not the first existentialist, Kierkegaard is largely considered to be its founder, though he never used the term. Sartre delivered his understanding of humanist philosophy through the lens of existentialism. While he somewhat disagreed with Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist and philosopher, and Nietzsche, the German philosopher, these men shared something in common despite living in different times. Man is the starting point for all discussion and philosophy. With the Enlightenment's emphasis on rationalism, skepticism, and a rejection of God, this man-centered insistence helped launch the existentialist movement. With thanksgiving and praise heaped onto men like René Descartes, John Locke, and David Hume. With God out of the way and declared dead, man could only look to himself. How convenient. This is where Sartre comes in. Sartre's famous quip, "Existence precedes essence," formed the thrust of his existentialistic humanism. What he argued was that man begins with existence without any foreordination or preset expectations, and then follows his existence with his essence, his personality. In other words, to quote Sartre on what he means by this, quote, "Man first exists. He materializes in the world, encounters himself, and only afterwards defines himself. If man, as existentialists conceive of him, cannot be defined, it is because to begin with, he is nothing. He will not be anything until later, and then he will be what he makes of himself. Thus, there is no human nature, since there is no God to conceive of it. Man is not only that which he conceives himself to be, but that which he wills himself to be, and, since he conceives of himself only after he exists, just as he wills himself to be after being thrown into existence, man is nothing other than what he makes himself. This is the first principle of existentialism." End quote. Hopefully you caught the nonsense there. He presupposes that God does not exist, and with his presupposition comes attached to it zero expectation of meaning. Man is brought into the world, no strings attached, no moral, philosophical expectations are involved. Then and only then can he begin to define himself and the world around him. Sartre also says that man is not just what he can dream up. It's what he wills for himself, what he does. In Sartre's worldview, man has the privilege of writing the dictionary and making his own reality. Since humanists like Sartre and others cannot and will not submit themselves to God, they are forced to create a system of explaining the world that is both free from external consequence and free from having to submit to God's desires. After all, it was Dostoevsky who once remarked, quote, "If God does not exist, everything is permissible." End quote. I hope you can see the destructive nature of humanism, and I want to now look at our text here in Psalm 115 to demonstrate further the folly of the humanist religion. In verse 1, the psalmist gives us the presuppositional starting point. "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness." God gets the glory, not man. We start with God, the Creator, and his loving kindness and truth. The context here is with regard to Israel being mocked for its weakness, its helplessness. They were being chided for their trust and hope in the Lord. For the humanist mocker who says in verse 2, "Where is their God?" we must understand that the only God that is acceptable to them is a God who serves their desires, who meets their demands, who acquiesces to their requirements. Essentially, the writer begins by saying, "God, the glory is yours, not ours. So why would you allow our enemies to taunt you, to question you and demean you?" The opening plea is for God to step in and not allow the scoffing to continue unchallenged. Now at this point, we could stop reading and assume that the writer, and we who think the same things, should not go about whining of our condition and retreating from the world. Indeed, this is what the church today has largely done. Instead of building and fighting, she has retreated and bellyached. But the writer does no such thing, and nor should we. What does the psalmist suggest next? The idols of the heathens are impotent and obtuse. our God is in the heavens, which means he is the true sovereign, and he does whatsoever pleases his sovereign will. Verse 3. What about the gods of the heathens? Verse 4 says that they are but silver and gold, which means they pulled them out of God's earth and fashioned them with the hands God gave them. So much for autonomy. They have mouths but do not speak, eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, noses but do not smell. They have hands but do not feel, feet but do not walk. They make no sounds in their throats. Verses 5 through 7. They are completely and entirely impotent and inconsequential. For the humanist religion, the purpose of their God is to serve their declared word. But the biblical religion, the faith of the one true God, is a faith that serves the God of creation. God is not to be counseled or governed by man. Rather, man is counseled and governed by God. It is interesting the way in which the Bible describes the false gods. They cannot speak, cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot smell. They cannot feel, cannot walk, cannot even make so much as a peep with their throat. Interestingly, animals can do these things, but false gods cannot. Idols are lifeless, meaningless, purposeless, and ultimately powerless. They are beneath even the animals. Look at verse 8. Those who make them are like them. So are all who trust in them. The end goal of people who worship false gods, and I am purposefully throwing all the false religions of the world into the same humanist basket, is that they become like the gods they worship, be it the naturalist, nihilist, Mormon, or Muslim. All of them become like that which they worship, radically impotent and arrogantly incompetent. Ultimately, these idols and the people that follow them will be frustrated and powerless in history. Their impotence is clearly seen in the fact that their man-centered religion is the root problem, and thus in their futility, they think they can fix it all themselves. Man is the problem, that we agree. However, the answer is not found in man, but the humanist thinks he can find it there. In prepping for this chapter, I decided to go online to see what modern-day humanists are saying. To start, I found the International Humanists and Ethical Union website, and here is their definition of humanism. Quote, humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance that affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. Humanism stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethics based on human and other natural values, in a spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. Humanism is not theistic, and it does not accept supernatural views of reality. End quote. Take note, the viciously circular problem here. Humans must give shape to their own lives. Notice the influence of Sartre's thinking. And thus they are free to do as they please. However, they know that can sound crazy because pedophiles do as they please. Anticipating this objection, they need to establish an ethical grid so they can create their own little version of a more humane society, and they base that on human and other natural values in a spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. They aren't saying anything substantive, by the way. In their minds, humans should shape their own destiny with no outside control. Read, no God. And in order to do that, in their pursuit of this meaning and shaping, they must be somewhat ethically reasonable. But that is sort of a natural thing that comes about anyway, right? It's nonsensical rubbish, really. Another website is Humanists UK, a place dedicated to the humanist religion in the United Kingdom. The heading of one section reads, quote, think for yourself, act for everyone, end quote. This was followed up with another statement, quote, at Humanists UK, we want a tolerant world where rational thinking and kindness prevail. We work to support lasting change for a better society, championing ideas for the one life we have. We do this because we're humanists. People who shape our own lives in the here and now, because we believe is the only life we get." End quote. One book I read is called Humanism by Stephen Law. Mr. Law is Reader in Philosophy at Haythrop College, University of London, and is editor of the Royal Institute of Philosophy journal called Think. In his little book, he describes in a nutshell what humanists believe. 1. Humanists believe sense, and reason more generally, are invaluable tools we can and should apply to all areas of life. No beliefs should be considered off-limits and protected from rational scrutiny. 2. Humanists are either atheists or at least agnostic. 3. Humanists believe that this life is the only life we have. 4. Humanism involves a commitment to the existence and importance of the moral value. Ethics should be strongly informed by study of what human beings are actually like, and of what will help them flourish in this world rather than the next. 5. Humanists emphasize individual moral autonomy. They reject external authority hanging over one's head, telling them what is right and wrong. 6. Humanists believe our lives can have meaning without it being bestowed from above by God. 7. Humanists are secularists, in the sense that they favor an open, democratic society in which the state takes a neutral position with respect to religion. As you can see, humanism is a deeply problematic worldview with inconsistencies running all the way through, and this is because the answer to the question, "What is man?" is answered with, "Whatever he wants to be." This is a question we absolutely should be asking. The problem, though, is the humanist can only conceive of an answer in terms of himself. He cannot look past himself to the realm of the metaphysical, the truly transcendent, the sovereign. This is because he will not submit to an external word, an external authority. At the root level, humanism is self-refuting and self-blinding. Humanists refuse to look beyond themselves to the one true God. When he throws off his obligation to serve God, his pursuit becomes a disintegration into the void, as Cornelius Van Til has taught us. His quest becomes a pursuit of blindness, speechlessness, and idiocy. When man looks to himself for the answers, he goes further and further into sin and darkness. He is dull and he is dead. No matter what these humanist scholars say, and they sound smart, they see themselves as the word of truth, the source of revelation, and the source of power. They are putting forth a rival religion and a rival social order, one where the philosopher kings rule and reign. The problem here is that his religion is unable to reform and revive himself. His religion only serves to execute his lusts as he burns with desire. This is the same problem that traces all the way back to Genesis 3, verse 5, when Adam and Eve wanted to become a law unto themselves. They wanted to determine good and evil on their terms. This humanistic spirit has rippled through the halls of history and time. The logical outcome of this greedy pursuit is destruction and ruin. You see, the gospel restores a man to his dominion calling under God. Without this restoration, man is dead in his humanist religion and unable to have dominion the way God intends. However, he still tries to have dominion, a perverted dominion nonetheless. Notice that both Stephen Law and the One website spoke both in terms of all of life. The church at large won't speak in these terms, but you better believe that the humanists are doing so. Without the gospel of Jesus Christ restoring a man to his calling under God, he cannot and will not submit to God, and thus he will seek to dominate other men. It's the difference between the biblical dominion religion and the satanic power religion. This do-it-yourself religion, as Rushduni has called it, is a man-made morality and ethical outlook that seeks to legislate sin and perpetuate immorality. There is a reason why after the Enlightenment, and during the 19th and 20th centuries, we had a rise in revolutionary activity. The humanistic religion took politics by storm with the rise of Marxism and communism. The state became God, and man became the means of upholding this God. Millions and millions of lives were snuffed out, all in the name of humanism, and the great leap forward. These totalitarian politics ushered in the new age of man, one where the state controls every area of life and thus helps dictate that which is and that which will be. It was and is entirely destructive because their gods are foolish and incompetent, carelessly throwing themselves about without consideration of what is left in their wake. It is an unholy postmillennialism. So, Christian, what must we do? We must understand the politics of humanism by understanding humanism as a philosophical worldview. We must see how pervasive this thinking is, both in public schools and the university. We must know how to do true presuppositionalism and how to apply the entirety of the Bible to all of life. We must be bold and courageous enough to speak to the issues and offer up a truly biblical answer. We must know biblical law. We must take seriously the gospel of the kingdom of God. It's our problem, and we must deal with it.